Hello everyone, my name is Anna Otter and today I'm going to be discussing the negligence portion of Carolyn Burpitt's Nurse Practitioner's Business Practice and Legal Guide covered in Chapter 7 of the text. This content that will be discussed is for Nursing 916 Nurse Practitioner Roles in Primary Care course through the Doctor of Nursing Practice curriculum through Fort Hays State University. The objectives that will be discussed in the presentation include defining the term negligence, differentiating negligence and malpractice, discussing the legal and ethical concerns regarding negligence and what this means under the obligation of a professional nurse practitioner, discussing professional guidelines and precautions regarding negligence, and lastly, discussing the impact of negligence on the nurse practitioner. Negligence, as defined by Patricia Yoder-Wise, is an indication of conduct that is lacking in care and typically concerns non-professionals. Medical negligence is the deviation from the care that a reasonable person would deliver and results in harm or injury to the patient. Negligence is not premeditated or planned and is an action or lack of regarding the patient's care. Medical negligence refers to substandard care that leads to disservice. As malpractice is the presence of professional negligence, it is important to discuss in the negligence portion of the chapter. The elements of malpractice include the nurse practitioner owed the plaintiff a duty, the nurse practitioner conduct fell below the standard of care, the nurse practitioner's conduct caused the plaintiff injury, and the plaintiff was injured. The first element is duty owed to the patient, which involves both the existence of the duty and the nature of the duty. Existence of the duty of care is generally established by showing the valid employment of the nurse practitioner within an institution. The more complex part is the nature of the duty, which involves the standard of care that represents the minimum requirements for acceptable practice or the minimum requirements for how one conducts oneself. Standards of care are established by reviewing the institution's policy and procedure manual, the individual's job description, and the practitioner's education and skills, as well as pertinent standards established by professional organizations, journal articles, and standing orders and protocols. The second element required in a malpractice case is breach of duty of care owed to the patient. Once the standard of care is established, the breach or falling below the standard of care is relatively easy to show. To determine the appropriate standard of care to apply, expert witnesses give testimony in court on a case-by-case basis, assisting the judge and jury in understanding nurse practitioner's standard of care. The third element needed for a successful malpractice case is foreseeability. Foreseeability involves the concept that in certain events may reasonably be expected to cause specific results. The nurse practitioner must have prior knowledge or information that failure to meet a standard of care may result in harm. The challenge is to show what foreseeable given the acts of case at time or occurrence, not when the case finally comes to court. Some of the more common areas concerning foreseeability include medication errors, patient falls, and failure to enact proper orders. The fourth element of malpractice suit is causation. The nurse practitioner's actions or lack of actions directly cause the patient harm. There must be a direct relationship between the failure to meet the standard of care and the patient's injury. If there is not sufficient that the standard of care has been breached, but rather that the breach of the standard of care must be direct cause and effect factor of injury to produce a proper malpractice suit. The fifth malpractice element must be physical, not merely psychological or transit injury. In other words, some physical harm must have been occurred by the patient when the practitioner ordered or did not intervene in the situation. The injured party must be able to prove damages in the sixth element of malpractice. Damages are vital because malpractice is non-intentional. Thus, the patient must show financial harm before the courts will allow a finding of liability against the defendant. Acceptable damages may be for immediate as well as future medical costs. Presented on the current slide, similarities and differences regarding negligence and malpractice are discussed. Malpractice is a type of negligence that concerns professional actions and is the failure of a person with a professional education and skill set to act in a reasonable and pertinent manner. Similarities between negligence and malpractice include the concern of actions that result in omission or the failure to do something that a reasonable, sensible person, or in this instance, a nurse practitioner would have done, or compassion, acting in a way that causes injury to the patient. There also is a common ground including non-intentional actions. Though injury resulted to the patient, the individual who caused the harm never intended to hurt the patient. With increased autonomy, accountability, and authority granted to the title of nurse practitioner, it is important to understand the standard of care and duty expected under that title. An evidence-based research article showed that in 2015, the Medical Defense Union report examined clinical negligence claims provided by nurse practitioners. The Medical Defense Union report showed nurse practitioner members reported 25 clinical negligence claims. The organization has dealt with more than 400 issues involving nurse practitioners in the past 5 years. The main cause of claims regarded to in the evidence-based research article was wrong or delayed diagnosis, featuring 3 out of 10 complaints and 40% of claims. This was followed by delayed referrals and prescribing errors. Additional causes of negligence include failure to follow standards of care, lack of proper communication, lack of access and monitoring to patients, and lack of patient advocacy. Consequences to the nurse practitioner regarding negligence include the state in which the nurse practitioner resides may investigate the practitioner if negligence approaches the level of gross negligence in the loss of malpractice cases. Gross negligence is the intentional failure to achieve a professional duty and irresponsible disregard of the consequences. Legal expenses, over-referring, doubt of professional abilities, and increase in insurance rates are additional consequences regarding negligence in healthcare. Consequences to patients include physical and emotional injury, lack of trust in healthcare professionals, and death. Ethical concerns regarding negligence is very important to discuss regarding the role of the nurse practitioner. Ethical principles are used each day in patient care situations. Negligence not only affects the legal concerns of healthcare, but the ethical portion of care. Autonomy is a term that is used to discuss the personal freedom and right to choose what will happen to oneself, as well as the accountability for making individual choices. The legal doctrine of informed consent is crucial in the principle of autonomy. Beneficence is the terminology in promoting good. A major duty of the nurse practitioner is to ensure safety and competence regarding patient care to promote good in all decisions and actions performed. Non-maleficence is a principle of doing no harm. The unintentional tort of negligence is in direct conflict of the principle non-maleficence, as harm or injury is the outcome of negligence. Fidelity, or keeping one's promise, is important in understanding negligence, as the nurse practitioner takes on the duty and standard of care when holding that title. Maintaining competency, patient advocacy, and patient safety is a promise made to each patient when that care is provided. When negligence is in concern, that trust or respect for others is compromised. Lastly, the code of ethics is important in discussing medical negligence. The code of ethics informs the public of the minimal standards acceptable of the discipline. Negligence leads to injury when substandard care is produced. Professional guidelines and precautions regarding negligence is crucial in discussing the role of the nurse practitioner in the legal and ethical concerns of negligence. Important principles to follow include following practice guidelines and always practicing within those guidelines, maintaining professional, appropriate patient-provider relationships, obtaining and maintaining professional liability insurance, providing high-quality patient-centered care, being empathetic to the patient and their concerns and questions, and if you are being sued, to never change records and to think carefully about your words and decisions thereafter. Taking on roles such as assessing and diagnosing patients, prescribing medications, and holding a higher autonomy, nurse practitioners are also at an increased risk of patients holding them individually accountable if something goes wrong. Inform patients about the risks, benefits, and alternative options open to them, including the option of doing nothing, so that they can make an informed choice. Keeping a record of all discussions with patients, including those over the phone, and recording positive as well as negative findings. Keeping your knowledge up to date and working within your level of competence allows the nurse practitioner to provide patient-centered care and to protect their licensure. To conclude this presentation, we have discussed the term negligence, the term malpractice, the legal and ethical concerns regarding negligence and what that means under obligation of a professional nurse practitioner, professional guidelines and precautions regarding negligence, and the overall impact on both the patient and nurse practitioner regarding negligence. As we develop into primary care providers, it is crucial that we understand the legal and ethical concerns regarding negligence, not only to ourselves as practitioners, but to the patient's physical and psychological health. Additionally, it is important to understand the role that we partake in as patient advocates and professionals as we obtain the title of doctorate-prepared nurse practitioners. As we continue to learn about ethical and legal concerns in the profession and are developing our role in the vocation, nurse practitioner malpractice and negligent data should be continuously analyzed and utilized through the National Practitioner Data Bank to inform the development of nurse practitioner education standards and graduate program curriculum and patient-centered care to address areas of clinical weakness and improve quality and patient safety. Presented on this slide are references utilized within this PowerPoint. Thank you for taking the time to examine the presented content regarding negligence, malpractice, and the effects and consequences regarding the discipline of advanced practice nursing.